Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 145, cover dated May 1981. And this issue marks the return of co-creator of the all-new, all-different Uncanny X-Men, Dave Cockrum. This is his cover. He'd spent a number of years on staff at Marvel, doing precisely cover design as his general work across the Marvel line of comics. And this is a really well-designed cover, of course. And front and center, you've got Dr. Doom there holding the unconscious body of Storm. It is a very eye-catching cover, and he's comically and in perfect Silver Age fashion toasting his own victory there with the X-Men lying around, also unconscious and defeated by him. I really like the coloring on this particular cover too. The detail of the rim lighting on Dr. Doom's plated armor there on his leg, as well as on Storm's skin and her leggings. That's really nicely picked out detail in the colouring of this cover. So let's open this one up. This is part one of a three-part storyline that begins with a kidnapping. And the creative team is Chris Claremont, writer, Dave Cockrum and Joe Rubinstein, artist. What that means is that Cockrum is providing breakdowns for Rubinstein to finish in the art, and Rubinstein is using a brush here on the art. So there is that difference moving from the John Byrne and Terry Austin precise, clean artwork collaboration to Cockrum and Rubinstein going back to an older style of art that, as I said, like brushwork, inked line that is less precise, less clean than the one that readers had become used to. And so there is a sense in which there's a kind of a stepping back in time going on here rather than forward after Byrne and Austin. But we've got a classic splash page here with the heads and names of the different characters. And interestingly, we have Iceman, Polaris and Havoc and Banshee, who are going to feature in this particular three-part storyline. Also to note is the misspelling of Havoc's name there. We've got a C on the end instead of a K, and that will continue until about halfway through the issue, when presumably Tom Orzechowski realized the mistake he was making and corrected it from that point on. So the story opens in the heart of the west side of Manhattan. This is another talent of Claremont's to give us these little summaries and introductions to places and locations. I always like that aspect of his writing. So in the heart of the west side of Manhattan, in what was once one of the roughest slum neighborhoods in the entire city, stands Lincoln Center, a performing arts complex famed throughout the world. Its centerpiece is the Metropolitan Opera House, which tonight plays host to Britain's Royal Ballet. So here we have Storm and Stevie Hunter. And Storm has invited Stevie to the ballet rather, and somebody here in the foreground in shadow and wearing a cloak is thinking to themselves, Storm is here, excellent, all I need to do now is spring the trap and the X-Men are mine. So is this Dr. Doom? Would be a question a reader might have after the cover. Well, let's continue and see what happens, what occurs. So, inside Professor X's private box at the Opera House, Storm and Stevie sit down to enjoy the show. Stevie apparently was a prima ballerina before an accident forced her to stop working as that and take up the dance teaching role that is how she's known to the X-Men. She's Kitty Pryde's dance teacher. And Storm here thinks to herself, there's such sadness in Stevie's voice, such longing. I want to reach out to comfort her, yet something holds me back. Goddess, what is wrong with me? Stevie is a lovely woman. Kitty likes her unreservedly. Why can't I? So interesting that Claremont is working in a little bit of characterization here, where Storm obviously feels a little bit jealous of Stevie's relationship with Kitty Pryde. And then the cloaked figure from the splash page enters the private box and touches them both on the neck. To their surprise. I like the difference here between what Storm says, what, and Stevie, who says, in more measured fashion, "I beg your pardon." So it's an interesting bit of characterization there on Claremont's part in the dialogue. So this turns out to be Ms Locke, an associate of Arcade's. And Storm reacts instantly, hitting Locke with a hurricane blast that is felt by other patrons in the opera house, but they're unaware of the fight that's about to take place in the neighbouring private box. So Storm shocks Stevie with the display of her power. She tells her she'll explain everything later, she hopes, but Stevie drops unconscious to the ground. And Ms Locke says, "I'm not in your power, X-Man, you are in mine." Okay, so how could that be? Well, it turns out, as Ms Locke explains, "When I touched you and your friend Storm, I injected a contact poison into your bodies. Without the antidote, you'll both be dead in minutes." So she explains that she wants full attention. The poison was merely to ensure that I had your undivided attention and to prevent your stopping my departure. And then she explains what's going on. So, as a consequence of business dealings he had with a mutant known as the Toad, Arcade incurred the enmity of Victor Von Doom, deposed dictator of Latveria. Dr. Doom kidnapped Arcade. He's sworn that Arcade will pay for insulting him. Dr. Doom is a man of his word. I wish the X-Men to rescue Arcade and to make certain that Von Doom never bothers him again. To give you an incentive, I've kidnapped those dearest to you. So hence the title of this particular story. And here we have the heads of Moira MacTaggert, Ileana Rasputin, Jean Grey's parents. So she explains the parents of Jean Grey: Moira MacTaggert, Candy Southern, Amanda Sefton, and Ileana Rasputin, Colossus's sister. They are in Murder World. Fail to free Arcade, Storm, and they will die there. So then Storm conks out. So that's the setup for this three-part storyline. Now, the editorial note here, the particular issue of Marvel 2 and 1 being referred to, the number wasn't filled in, but later on we learn it was number 68. So there's quite a bit of editorial noting going on, annotation going on in this issue, as the story is tied in quite tightly into Marvel continuity from the time period. Dr. Doom, in fact, as we learn in an editorial note a little later, was deposed from Latveria after the events of Fantastic Four number 200. So a couple of years earlier in publishing time. So Storm recovers from the poison. Obviously, Ms Locke gave her the antidote, and then she transforms into her costume and flies to Amanda Sefton's Manhattan apartment in order to ascertain whether Locke was telling the truth. And there she discovers that perfume. I recognize it from the theatre. Ms Locke was wearing it, and pinned to that pillow, that card. Oh, Amanda, no. So Amanda Sefton has been kidnapped. Also, a little detail of Storm using her lockpick skills to enter the apartment undetected. So then she flies off to upstate New York, to Bard College, to check on Jean Grey's parents. And this is an interesting detail here, and Claremont thinking out aspects of Storm's powers. So Storm thinks that the Greys live up the Hudson River, 90 miles up the Hudson River. If I summon a powerful enough tailwind, I can be there in minutes. But to do that, I must warp weather patterns across a considerable area. I'll create atmospheric chaos over the city. If the need were any less imperative, I would not do it, but I must. And then in the third-person narrative caption, we're told once more she bends the elements to her will. The wind around her, an unimaginable force. Again, her actions do not go unnoticed. So that is interesting, because one of the outcomes of her urgent control over the weather will turn out to be something quite unexpected. So the pilots here in the jet, they are affected by what she's done, but they're not put in any danger. Soon, in the sleepy hamlet of Annandale on Hudson, just down the road from Bard College, which is where Claremont did his undergraduate degree, where Professor John Grey has taught for the past 15 years. So Storm alights, she enters the house. the Greys are gone, and so she infers that they've been kidnapped. And here in the foreground we have the holempathic matrix crystal given the Greys by Empress Lilandra after Jean's death. Not only contains a three-dimensional image of Jean Grey, Phoenix, but also the essence of her personality. So we see her smiling there, but then her expression changes. And I always found that interesting in terms of what maybe Claremont was hinting at, Claremont and Cockrum hinting at there. So Storm leaves and she promises Jean silently in her thoughts, "We will save your parents. On that you have my word." So let's continue here. And the scene switches to the X-Mansion and the Storm relays to the team what's happened. Now, just a detail that I noted was we don't get a response from Colossus regarding the kidnapping of his little sister Ileana, which makes me wonder whether he was told about it completely, or is it just a lapse on Claremont's part that he doesn't work in a little bit of dialogue from Peter expressing his concern for his little sister. So the professor gets on the phone, so to speak, to the Avengers, and specifically Hank McCoy, former X-Man, in order to get some information on Doctor Doom, because the X-Men have never faced Doctor Doom before. And Storm asks the operative question, is he that formidable a foe, equal to Magneto? And Nightcrawler here says, in Magneto's class at least, I heard of him while growing up in the circus. His name is known and feared throughout Central Europe. Even Amanda's mother, Margali, respects his power. So, the Beast offers Professor X, the Avengers, help. And the Professor thinks about it and says, for the present, I prefer to keep this matter within the family. So Beast transfers over the files on Doom to the Professor, and the Professor says, excellent, we'll be in touch. Now, Logan gets involved and he thinks, Charlie, you talk like we plan on doing what that Lockbroad wants. Are we giving in? And the Professor asks, have you an alternative, Wolverine? So Wolverine's alternative is trash her permanently and murder World, get our people back and let Arcade rot. Charlie, we can't yield to blackmail. If Ms Locke gets away with this, we'll never see an end to it. And he continues, we can't protect all those we care for. If we can't protect all those we care for, we'll always be vulnerable that way. Our only chance is to stop it before it starts. We fight back. We make certain no one ever tries to get at the X-Men this way again by making the price of doing it too high to pay. And then Storm says, Wolverine is right, Professor. So Storm is in position of leader since Cyclops taking a leave of absence. At least in part, we cannot submit, yet we cannot abandon Ms Locke's hostages, and I will not sacrifice them. So the Professor twigs that Storm has a plan, and she does. But we're not told exactly 100% what the plan is at this point. Instead, the scene switches to Rio Diablo in the American Southwest, and Alex Summers and Lorna Dane, who are there working on, who are graduate students, each completing field work on their doctorates. And they've had a rock slide in the night, so they're out using their powers to address that. Havoc using his plasma beams to work with surgical precision, clearing the rubble from the toppled windmill. And then Lorna uses her powers over the magnetic field to raise the metal windmill and straighten it as well. And just at that point, the Professor contacts them telepathically. And there again, we've that misspelling of Havoc's code name. So he tells them that he needs them. Lorna doesn't want to go back to the X-Men life. The Professor says, he says, had I a choice, I would respect your decision, but I have not. The need is desperate. So Angel is sending one of his private aircraft to pick them up in 2 hours. And that's it. They're going to be on board with this adventure. And then we pick up with Bobby Drake, who is also in college, and he's finishing a grueling all-nighter on a term paper. He's throwing darts at a poster of the Ayatollah Khomeini there in his dorm room. And he's going to have a Coke to celebrate his finishing his term paper when the Professor arrives and tells Iceman he's needed. Iceman doesn't make any quibbles over that. He's on board and he's going to make his way to the mansion. But it's funny, the Professor isn't sending a private jet or even the limousine for Iceman. He's going to have to get the bus, it seems. So then we pick up on Concorde. So Chris Claremont, a big aficionado of airplanes, aircraft, all of that. So the Concorde, British Airways Concorde, first flight of the morning, is arrowing towards New York City's Kennedy International Airport at twice the speed of sound. Who's aboard except for Banshee? Last seen in X-Men 129 when he retired. And the Professor pops up astrally beside Banshee and exclaims, Banshee, that'd give anyone a jump. But Banshee's cool, calm and collected, and he whispers to the Professor, we've got trouble, old friend, Moira's being kidnapped. So the Professor says, we know, and I'd intended asking your aid. It seems you've anticipated me. That's nice. I like that. Banshee is quick thinking, he's strategic minded. He's already on his way to New York. And so I like that point, character point regarding Banshee. And he thinks to himself, it's been ages since I've seen Charles create a telepathic astral projection. He looked rocky. The effort must have cost him dear. I pray he's all right. So he's struggling here, and then we get another interesting story point, something being seeded for the future. Why is he struggling with his telepathy, and he hasn't been able to contact Cyclops? So he thinks to himself, he doesn't share with Storm. There's been a subtle shift in the Earth's magnetic field, creating interference, psychic static, that inhibits my telepathic communication over long distances, forcing me to make a supreme effort to transmit the simplest of messages. So, of course, who could that be except for Magneto? He gets it, and he asks the question of himself, but why has he done this, and why now? Well, we don't get an answer just yet, but then we pick up with Cyclops, who has been shipwrecked and washes up on a beach in the Bahamas. And when he opens his eyes, of course, his optic blasts emerge, and he's catapulted out of the sand with the Force, and he searches around for his ruby quartz lenses. Of course, they've been lost at sea. So he rips the remains of his shirt apart to create a makeshift blindfold. And then the captain of the trawler Arcadia, she finds him on the beach. The two of them were shipwrecked the night before. The new voice belongs to Elitis Forrester, owner and captain of the Arcadia. She and Scott have known each other only a short time, but even so they've become friends. Last night, when a freak storm erupted out of nowhere to nearly capsize the Arcadia and toss all overboard, Scott immediately dove in after her. That freak storm was caused by Storm's action in New York the night before. When she changed the weather patterns over the city, it caused the storm. I like that little detail. That all actions have consequences that Claremont has worked in here. So something that I find a little bit odd though is that when Elitis introduced herself to Scott before, she told him to call her Lee, but now he's calling her Al, and so that's a little bit inconsistent, but however. So she says she's had paramedic training and she wants to take a look at his eyes, but he hasn't shared his secret with her, so he tells her no, and then they confer about their chances of being rescued. And I think it's Elitis who says, they could be rescued tomorrow or they could be there for the rest of their lives. But Cyclops is not available to help the team against Doctor Doom. So back in the X-Mansion, we have the Professor, Storm and the Professor organizing the assembled X-Men into two teams. So Storm says she's going to take Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Colossus and Angel and confront Doctor Doom. If possible, we'll try to secure Arcade's release without a fight. And then the other team, simultaneously, Havoc, you accompanied by Polaris, Iceman and Banshee, will locate Murder World and rescue Ms Locke's hostages. So we've got an A team and a B team, and we've got a two-pronged approach to this. So that's good strategy. And Havoc also makes a good point. He says, we four have never operated as a team. I suggest a combat workout in the Danger Room to loosen up. And of course, the Danger Room is still a wreck after Kitty Pryde taking on that demon on Christmas Eve, as detailed in X-Men 143. And Kitty is not going with either team. She needs to get better. She's got the flu here. And so the Blackbird takes off. It was also damaged in Kitty's fight against the demon, but Wolverine and Nightcrawler, we're told, worked night and day in order to repair it so that it's functional again. And so they take off to the A-Team, so to speak, to go after Doctor Doom and Arcade. So where is he? Well, here we learn 200 miles up country in the heart of New York's Adirondack Mountains stands a medieval castle, originally constructed by Doctor Doom. It was recently turned into an amusement park by one of the X-Men's old foes, now reformed, the Toad. Despite its remoteness, Toad World was a great success. I find that hilarious. So this was all detailed in Marvel 2-in-1 number 68. So inside the castle, there is a lightning bolt strikes. Who could it be except for Storm? So nice anchor image there of Storm by Cockrum and Rubinstein. And she says she comes in peace, seeking the master of this place. She says she would speak with him immediately. And here in this particular panel, we see an armor-plated leg in our foreground. And of course, it's Doctor Doom who says he rules here. And that's a nice anchor image of Doctor Doom as well. Although it's not terribly dynamic, you know, it's not kind of like Kirby John Buscema style Doctor Doom. Maybe his legs would need to be a little farther apart, a little Dutch angle perhaps, or a little tilt of perspective. But, you know, it looks good. And so Storm gets to business. She says, "You've Arcade, I want him alive and unhurt." And Doom responds just like that. You demand and Doom obeys. And suppose Doom refuses? Of course, Doom speaking like a Silver Age villain, talking about himself in the third person. And Storm responds, "Then one of us may well live to regret it." So Doom's impressed. Indeed, I'm not given to impulsive decisions. Shall we discuss this matter further over dinner? My chef sets a superb table. He dares not do otherwise. That's hilarious. I find that so funny. So Storm, after a brief pause, accepts a gracious invitation. Lord Doom, so she's buttering him up there, graciously accepted. But outside, the rest of the A-Team are en route to the castle. And Nightcrawler teleports in, takes out a couple of these guards. They never knew what hit them. Now remember that one of Dave Cockrum's favourite X-Man is Nightcrawler, so we're going to see a lot more of Nightcrawler in action in the Dave Cockrum issues. He's always going to be demanding that Nightcrawler gets to do something significant, and indeed he does here, being the first one in after Storm. Then we have Angel ferrying in Wolverine and Colossus, and they enter into the heart of the castle, making their way towards the cell where they believe that Arcade is being held. But what do they find except that the cell is empty? And Wolverine says, "I had a feeling this caper was going down too easy. I think we've been suckered." So somebody behind with a robot voice says, "I think you're right, Shorty." Who could this be? Well, it's a bunch of Doom's private army in these battle suits, which they say were designed to trash the Fantastic Four. Trashing you freaks should be child's play. That's a nice image there by Cockrum. So Wolverine out with the claws, goes up against them. Instantly we get a bit of a fight here. And in the beginning, the guys in the battle suits fare better against the X-Men. But then the scene shifts to Doom's dining room, and it looks like they're having 2 roast turkeys each. Or is that? Hold on a second. No, that is a roast pig and turkey there. So ham and turkey and lots of trimmies and extras. An interesting detail here, Doom has a couple of telescreens in on the table, and he's watching what's going on in the rest of the castle, the fight against the X-Men there. And remember what I said about Dave Cockrum, one of his favorites is, or his favorite is Nightcrawler, so Nightcrawler gets the feature very clearly there on the screen. And this is a weird bit. There's a little bit of chemistry here between Doom and Storm. So Storm thinks to herself, "I'm actually enjoying this and regretting that my sole purpose here is to keep Doom occupied while my fellow X-Men find and free Arcade. They should have reached his cell by now. Doom is a fascinating man." And Doom himself, you know, also is interested. He says, "Extraordinary. Storm seems drawn to me, as I am to her. Lioness to lion, queen to king. She does not fear me. She should. she will. So Doom isn't exactly a romantic. He feels the chemistry, but he's going to make her fear him. And of course there he's monitoring the fight on those concealed telly screens. So let's continue, get past those advertisements. And now the X-Men start to do a bit better. So Wolverine, of course, with his adamantium claws, fares well against the guys in the battle suits. So he opens up the tin suit there and punches the lights out of whoever's inside. So he's not killing the men in the suits. Nightcrawler gets caught in a net, but of course he easily teleports out of that. And the two guys shooting at him at once blast each other unconscious. So now the X-Men have the upper hand, and the lone soldier in the battlesuit decides to flee, hoping that his master will forgive his strategic withdrawal. But Doom is not one to forgive, so he makes a note to himself to punish the guy at the earliest opportunity. And then who's this coming in to the dining room in silhouette except for Arcade, which shocks Storm. And Doom introduces Arcade. I believe you know each other. And Arcade says, "That's a fact, Vic." Very disrespectful to Dr. Doom. "Though we've never been formally introduced. How do, sweet thing." So Storm is taken aback, naturally, that Arcade is a guest, not a prisoner. So she realizes they've been set up. It was a trap from the very beginning, and she led the X-Men into it. How could she have been so blind? So one of the things that Claremont is doing with Storm in these issues where she's team leader and in Cyclops' absence is have her make a few mistakes, have her make some good plans, some plans that 100% don't work out, where she second guesses herself in terms of whether she makes a good leader or not. So there's that element of characterization going on the whole time. So she attacks Doom with a lightning bolt, and it doesn't injure him at all. An admirable try, Storm, and an admirable plan as well. Admirable. Against a lesser foe, both might have succeeded, but I am Doom. I've forgotten more about strategy and combat than you are ever likely to learn. So she, a novice leader, is up against a master strategist. So he sends some kind of globe at her that catches her hand. Her forearm turns to chrome. Then she gets her concentration shattered. Storm loses control of the winds that held her aloft and drops to the floor. As she lands, the terrifying transformation sweeps up her arm, across her shoulders, down her side. In the literal blink of an eye, it's over. So she's turned into a living chrome statue. The X-Men arrive just a few seconds too late, and Doom deals with them for the most part, except for Colossus, who's immune to his energy weapon, and he gets ready to attack Doom there. I really like this particular panel with Colossus, and the use of a little screen tone there as well by Josef Rubinstein. That's a really effective looking panel. Colossus looks like he really means business, but Doom takes him out easily. And this is a little bit of hilarious dialogue from Doom. Doom does not engage in fisticuffs, youth. All I need do is use a neural disruptor to scramble the motor neurons of your armored body. So Doom is triumphant. We're at the point of the cover image. He's taken out all the X-Men. So he says, "You have entered the Lion's Den, X-Men. You will not leave it alive." We could have had that dialogue on the cover. That would have been interesting. But next issue, Murder World, a lovely place to die. So obviously we're going to catch up with the B team and see how they get on in Murder World. And an interesting, the letters page here is handled by Chris Claremont. So we've got his welcome aboard to Dave Cockrum there. And also we have his what would we say, his advertisement for the next issue here too. And he answers an interesting letter here, and it's dated December 1980 to a character who's asking him about the difference between Wolverine's readiness to kill, and she refers to World War II and all of this kind of thing. So a kind of a moral question here that Claremont responds to. Interesting stuff. Well, I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Dave Cockrum's return to Uncanny X-Men and the first part of a three-part storyline of the X-Men versus Dr. Doom and Arcade. If you enjoyed the video, please like it in YouTube, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.